Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, you may remember January 6th, that little insurrection thing that happened. One of the people, this Ali Alexander, one of the white supremacist guys, evidently he says he's going to comply. He is going to comply with the subpoena because, well, he doesn't have any money. Now, one, I thought this was funny because I think he's finally realized he is not in the big club. While Steve Bannon is taking hey, I'm going to fight this as far as I can. We're going to make a media circus out of this. It's all going to be about me because he's got really deep pockets. Well, Ali says, nope, he doesn't want to go to jail. So under the threat of imprisonment and spending a lot of money that he doesn't have, he will be privately deposed before the committee sometime in December. And look, we need to be deposing more of these people. And I want to see that in public. This nonsense that it gets to be behind closed doors. Sorry, I don't agree. But it is what it is, and we'll see where it goes. Now, as I said in the last segment, the reality is we've got some messaging problems. The fact that Democrats, I don't think, have done a good enough job of selling their infrastructure bill, and especially not the Build Back Better plan. We got a lot of work to do, and here to share some thoughts on how maybe we can do a little bit better. I've asked Steve Pierson to come talk with us. Steve is the co-host of the Swing Left podcast, Swing Left's How We Win podcast. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So what do you think of Ali Alexander saying, I'll be deposed?
Well, certainly, I think it's good when someone honors a congressional subpoena. That's what everyone should be doing. Sadly, the reason he's doing it is because of lack of resources. So I'm actually really happy to see a lot of these subpoenas going out, and I'm excited to see justice start to be served and getting to the bottom of, what has become like just this asinine normal thing to have these people who are still our lawmakers, elected lawmakers, who were party to the insurrection, who are still serving and aren't facing consequences for their actions. So yes, I'm glad he's honoring the subpoena. I expect many more in the weeks and months to come.
I mean, but for me, this is just going way too slow. Got to be moving this along. Let's get more. This should have been started on the 7th of January. We should be almost done with this by now, with massive numbers of perp walks and maybe building an additional wing onto a local prison somewhere.
Frustratingly slow for everyone, and I think it's important. You talked about messaging too. It's really important that we keep this to the forefront, and because justice does move slowly, and we want to make sure that in the public sentiment that this doesn't just slide into the background. This needs to be on the forefront of everyone's minds.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's the right completely understands how to do narrative. And what they've done masterfully, I think, is they've almost flipped the script on this. I've got tons of people saying, no, it was a patriotic day. It wasn't an insurrection. It was the most glorious day of democracy we've ever seen. And I'm going, no, they were defecating on the floor. That's not patriotic.
Yeah, they weren't a bunch of tourists checking out Congress. I've been to the Capitol as a tourist, and it didn't look like the video that we've seen, and more video keeps coming out, and it's frightening. It's awful. Nothing like that has happened in our country. The audaciousness of it. It is absolutely an insurrection. It was not a tourist visit to our capital.
No, it's crazy. Just crazy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Steve Pierson, co-host of Swing Left's How We Win podcast. If you've got a thought, a question, comment for Steve, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. In looking at this, Steve, the messaging that came out of the Rittenhouse trial, and I'm sure you paid a lot of attention to this. It was all about self-defense. He was defending himself. And look, I agree. He was defending himself, but nobody really seemed to bother with the other side of this. This is a kid who went looking for trouble and found it. and there's no repercussions for doing that. And this is where I kind of have a problem with where things are going, because it seems to me that we're glorifying vigilantism and idiocy like we saw.
Well, that's the scary result of that verdict. And it wasn't an unexpected verdict. And for anyone who watched the trial go down and watched the clear bias of the judge in that trial, it was, the verdict that we expected, but still very jarring to see it play out that way. And, I'm an organizer, I'm an activist. And for anyone that has been part of any kind of action, marches, and been protesting, this sends a message that's very scary, that someone can cross state lines with an illegal weapon and disrupt a protest. And I think Stephen Colbert said it very well when he said, if what he did wasn't against the law, then we need to change the law, because it was clearly against the law. The judge dismissed the illegal weapons charge or something, like. He was a 17-year-old with someone else's assault weapon, roaming the streets to, quote unquote, help. It was ridiculous. And then of course there's the blatant double standard that exists. If the script was flipped and he was a black man in the same situation, we would have a very, very different conversation about this. But we did have a recent good result from the Ahmaud Arbery trial, and seeing those so-called wannabe vigilantes who are straight up murderers who performed a lynching of Ahmaud Arbery, all convicted for murder. And that's the way that should have gone. So it's been a very mixed bag for justice in the last few weeks, with trials that we've all been watching very closely around the country.
Yeah, but I look at the one in Georgia, and it was clear. I mean, you saw the video; it was very clear of what was out there. That was that should have been the verdict, and I think everybody knew that was going to be the verdict. The weird thing is we celebrated the proper verdict instead of saying, no, we've got a functional system. It's not about celebrating or being upset. It did the right thing, and we expect that. We're now in this weird place where we're kind of like, well, are we going to get the right verdict here or not? Which is, again, kind of a scary place to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say everyone was expecting the verdict to go that way, I think a lot of black men and women were not expecting the verdict to go that way, because they're used to having the evidence as, right in front of them, so cases open and shut, and still being unjustly prosecuted. And I think that the rise of these videos and the viral videos and the nature of it that has brought this to the public eye for a lot of people who don't experience that kind of violence in their own communities has made it harder for these verdicts to go, to go the wrong way, I guess. But we got a lot of work to do. I think a lot of people were expecting that verdict to go south, and I'm really pleased that we did have justice in the Ahmaud Arbery
Now,
case.
you talked about being an organizer and an activist, and like you, I've marched in all kinds of pickets and been in all kinds of situations. And for me, it wasn't even about the Rittenhouse verdict. It was about what was going to be sent in society. Is the answer now, when I go to one of these protests, that I have to carry a gun to defend myself? Is it going to be that we're going to have to shoot first? I mean, is this the message that we want to send? And I've yet to have people really talk about that. Everyone wants to talk about whether the verdict was right, or if it wasn't right, or any of that. I'm more worried about societally. Where do we end up in this? If that's going to be the message, is that where we end up?
It's an interesting question. It definitely feels like a lot of the time that we are at a tipping point in our society. Certainly, we let off talking about this insurrection that was on our Capitol, and almost a year ago now. So for me, no, I'm not going to carry a gun to a rally or to a protest. I'm going to go there peacefully, and I'm going to bring friends with me, and I'm going to encourage everyone to come with me too, because there is power in our numbers, and there is power in our solidarity, and so it makes it the Rittenhouse verdict makes it more dangerous, and we can't turn away from that as much as it gives license perhaps to more Rittenhouses to come and be disruptors in a very dangerous way. We need to keep standing up, and we need to do it together. So this is we have a long history of protest in our country. You know it better than just about anyone. Unions have led that, and there's been times when violence has happened because of that. But we need to keep moving forward and do it peacefully.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Steve Pierson, co-host of Swing Left's How We Win podcast. You got a question, comment, for something for Steve? 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. So to the podcast, how do we win? I mean, there's a lot of people looking at 2022 with real concern because the messaging, well, a little shoddy at this point. Maybe it picks up in the new year, but a lot of down heads right now. How do you see Democrats winning?
Well, yeah, it's a loaded title for a podcast because a lot rests on our shoulders, I guess. But there is a lot against us in the midterms. There's no doubt, and your listeners and everyone should be worried about 2022 coming up. Less than a year now, the midterms, and historically, the party that's in power gets a shellacking in the midterms. We have a slew of anti-democratic voter suppression bills that the Republicans have passed in states all over the country. We have gerrymandering run rampant with redistricting happening right now. So yeah, we have a lot to overcome. But we also had 81 million voters showing up in 2020 during a global pandemic to cast their vote and elect Joe Biden president. And we had them show up again to win the majority in the Senate with the Georgia special election, overcoming hours and hours of standing in lines to vote in Georgia. So how we win, the spoiler alert, the simple answer to your question is we all have to get involved. And, when you look at the last couple of elections, 2020 and 2018, those elections were really taken over the top by new voters. We built on those majorities, and we recruited, registered, and brought new voters into the fold. A lot of working class voters, a lot of people of color, a lot of people who we don't typically reach out to, who are disenfranchised, and they showed up. We have to make sure that they continue to show up. We have to stay engaged with them and not just be transactional about our campaigns, just
Right.
showing up in communities like a month before the election and tell them that they need to vote for the Democrat. We've got to stay engaged with them. And the stuff that's going on right now in Congress and from Biden should get everyone very excited about the direction our country's going in. We have I think in the history of our country, the biggest investment in infrastructure, and with the Build Back Better reconciliation package, which I do believe will get passed before the holiday, before Christmas. We're going to have this giant investment in our country that is going to lift people up, and so we need to be talking about that. But we also need to be preaching to the choir, really, and telling the people who showed up in 2018 and 2020, making sure they show up in 2022.
That's the way to begin to move forward. Absolutely. So how can folks get the How We Win podcast? What do folks need to do?
Well, it's everywhere. You find your podcast. You can also go to swingleft.org/podcast and find it there. And very importantly, while you're at swingleft.org, please sign up to volunteer, because that really is how we win. It's not enough just to vote. Sadly, democracy is at stake, and we really need everyone to make some calls to voters, to write some letters to voters, and to get involved themselves, to get involved in your own communities. I mean, that's how we win.
Yeah, and get involved right now by calling your senators and telling them that we need to pass that Build Back Better plan and actually get some
Absolutely.
more things done, because you're gonna want to have something going into next year's election to say, hey, this is what we accomplished, this is the work we did, and look, I'm happy with Joe Biden to this point, the number of jobs that have been created, the things that have gotten done.
20 million children lifted out of poverty.
Yep.
That's incredible.
And they got to do a much better job of tooting their own horn. But Steve, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Good stuff, Steve Pierson. Make sure you check out his website, swingleft.org. You can also get the podcast, swingleft.org/podcast. Quick break, right back after this with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425.